Hello and welcome. My name is Eugenie Jones-Lockridge. I'm Marketing and Communications Program Coordinator with DCD. We're very happy to have you with us here today, thanking you for tuning in. And we have a very special panel with us here today to be able to answer any questions that you might throw our way. We have with us, still relatively new to the fold, our assistant.
Hi, Eugenie. Thanks for hosting this and for having me on here.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here, David. Also from Permit Services, Veronica Basson.
Hey, Jeannie. Thanks for having this. This should be fun.
It'll be fun. And boots on the ground specialist, one of our members of our DCD review team, stormwater reviewer specialist, Bill Bumbalow.
Hi, Eugenie, and thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here, Bill. So we know, David, starting with you first, that DCD is very steeped in process improvement. We're always looking at what we're doing, how we're doing it, and how we can be better at it. And the process improvement is what led us to be here today surrounding the topic of building site plan submittals. Can you give us just a thumbnail sketch in the background of what we've done and where we are right now?
Absolutely. Thank you, Eugenie. Yeah, so first of all, we're consistently looking for ways to improve our processes. We also are looking for ways to assist the applicants in making good land use decisions regarding their property. So, you know, that's what part of this process is, doing just that. In particular, the process that we're talking about today, we're utilizing a singular document between two different agencies to conduct two different reviews with two different criterias. And this universal site plan idea that we had been operating under we were finding it difficult to put it in the least. So amongst the problems we were having, there's a lack of clarity of some requirements between the two agencies. There's high return rate for corrections. It was conflicting directions and requirements that we had, and as well as design professionals were having some concerns regarding the use of the document for something that maybe wasn't intended for. So because of that, we've collaborated with Kitsap Public Health District to coordinate revised process to simplify and ultimately achieve a higher rate of success for the applicants.
Great. So Veronica, can you speak to, from the permit services side of the house, what was the previous process like and what were some of the challenges in that process?
Absolutely, I can. Yeah, so the previous process, as Dave Kinley alluded to, was that we were forcing, if you had a property on septic, we were forcing a permit applicant to only use the septic design by the licensed septic designer as their site plan. They could not use anything else. Credit to the applicants over the years, especially since we went online permitting, that have helped push us to make this change. You know who you are. But yeah, so we were requiring people to use this septic design, specifically the stamped approved health district septic design, nothing else. An applicant might actually have a site plan that shows everything that DCD needs to review for a permit, perhaps when drawn by a designer, a drafter, a designer, an architect, or an engineer. But we would reject that and say, no, we're using a universal site plan. It's got to be the septic design. And so that led to a lot of rejection in the intake process and even the approval process of a permit. We would just kind of be forcing back this issue and caused a lot of delays in the intake, review, and approval process and frustration from permit applicants.
Thank you, Veronica. Mm-hmm. So, David, you're aware that we've recently completed customer surveys. We sent out more than 600 customer surveys, and we also did a series of focus group sessions, as well as we're always taking in input from customers ongoing as well. With all that information and your coming on board as a new CBO, we've kind of had the initiative to take this change. What has been the most significant change in the building submittal process?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and first of all, thank you for the outreach that you've done on this. It's really important to get feedback in order for us to make good decisions regarding process and procedures. So the biggest change is that you've got multiple different ways that you can provide us this information that we're requiring for the site plan. So first, it could be, as Veronica had mentioned, you have different design professionals that put together site plans. So if you have one from an engineer or from an architect or other design professional, you can submit that as your DCD site plan. You can self-prepare it. You know, if you've got a scaled drawing that you've done yourself and it includes all the elements that we're looking for, we can accept something that's self-prepared. It doesn't not have to be done by a design professional, stamped or anything like that if it's a non-engineered project. So the third one, you could start with the septic design. If a septic designer has provided you with something that's sufficient for those uses, that would be something that we would accept. But our preference would be that it wouldn't be the same stamped, approved one from the septic, from Kitsap Public Health District, simply because there's things on that we could return for comment. Like, what if we don't have one of these elements on the checklist that we've asked for? We don't want that to go back to the health district for them to review, re-stamp, and send to us. We'd rather keep it separate. So, so those three formats are things that we can accept in this process. The idea is that if you've provided us the information, we should be able to review it for code compliance, not keep it to one particular document that has to be done exactly like this.
Thank you, David. So, Bill, we've expanded the amount of options for people to submit their building site plan. What is the goal, the primary goal behind this change?
The primary goal is to provide our applicants with a review checklist that will ultimately lead to a complete submittal and a higher success rate.
Gotcha. So, what I'm hearing you say then, and David, I'm turning this question to you. This checklist is going to improve the rate of being able to be successful and get your building permit through the process without difficulties. Maybe
exactly.
Not.
Yeah, exactly. So in this process, we've revised our brochure that includes a complete submittal checklist so that there's no question from the applicant as to what needs to be on this checklist. So it includes all the facets of our review, whether it be stormwater, environmental, building and fire. There's a checklist for all those components. And so by setting the clear expectation, we're laying a foundation for successful application.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Veronica, on the permit side of the house, what will this new checklist and this new submittal process mean for the permit services team and for the applicants that are making their submissions for approval?
Well, what we're hoping is just one source for what DCD needs to approve a site plan. Not having to bebop between agencies and have that part unclear, and a quicker intake because we're not rejecting documents. So the permit techs, we rely on the same intake instructions that applicants do. So we just need to make it understandable. There are terms sometimes that our department has to use because they're in the code, but that doesn't mean we can't explain what those are in plain speak. So the goal is to, the new checklist, if anyone's seen it, is to make it more approachable, categorize the information that we need on a site plan. The categories also correspond to our review team. So for example, if the category is stormwater or in critical areas, for example, that should correspond to a DCD staff person like Bill, where you can use as a resource. And we're not done yet. It's not like we're just checking this box that we've redone the checklist and we're good to go and applicants will never see anything different. Just in talking to people this week, it's like, for every element we ask for on a site plan, can we hyperlink to a dictionary of terms or a reference of terms or even a map on our website? We always want to push the envelope and make it as user-friendly as possible.
So have there been materials created? Because some of the comments that I received when leading focus groups was that there was a need for greater information availability on our website. Has there been material created that speaks to this process that someone can refer to for a deeper dive beyond this meeting today?
Absolutely, and that is also, it came up as a question in the chat box. Our new site plan brochure is an overview. It also includes a specific checklist. Again, if you applied for permits before, you're used to the joint one that we had with the health district. Well, we've just narrowed ours down to what DCD needs to approve the process. And Eugenie, that is now getting finalized and will be published and available.
Nice. So one last question before we open it up to questions from our group here today. Bill, just looking at your situation as a member of the review team, you have a stack of applications on your desk and you're going through them. What if you had an opportunity, barring COVID, that you could have one of those applicants sitting across the desk from you asking you questions? What advice would you give that applicant?
To do their due diligence. I know a lot of these properties that we look at anymore are very challenging. There's oftentimes unmapped wetlands. We're dealing with slope issues and lots of moving parts to all this. So if I was to sit down and talk directly across to an applicant, I would first and foremost ask if they've done their research. Is there any wetland concerns? Is there easement concerns? Is there, anything that you could possibly think of that could potentially be an issue with your submittal? It's just so very important to get out there, to reach out. I'm available, our DCD review staff's available, to just ask questions so we know that you guys are understanding everything that needs to be put on the site plan.
Gotcha. Thank you, Bill. Veronica, I'm going to follow up a little bit on that question because I know this is in your bucket. What are the options for someone reaching out for help and assistance through DCD?
That's a good question. It's a little more challenging right now because, as most of you know, our physical doors are closed, our lobby is closed. You can't just come in during our business hours or in the mornings like you might be used to and meeting with someone like Bill or the other reviewers. So right now, it's basically, it's going to be, you can always use our phone line. There actually has been a misconception lately that we are not calling people, that you can't reach us by phone. The difference is our good friends, the Kitsap One call agents that you might be used to answering the phones, everybody's remote, so they're not live answering, but you can still leave a message and they will route it to a Bill Bumbleau or a so-and-so, and they can call you back. Even though most of our department is working from home, calls are still available. Even more immediate, we have expanded our live chat 9 to noon every day. Bill Bumbleau, the environmental and land use planners, are on live chat in the mornings. It kind of depends on the nature of your question. Live chat is a great option for certain questions, and some might actually require a conversation or a follow-up email where you can include more document attachments and things like that. And we also have a variety of meetings that a lot of people are familiar with, the staff consultation, which is a good kind of starter meeting, especially if you have a complex residential project. But we have other ones that might also be better suited depending on the questions, and we can try to help you determine the best option.
Thank you. So thank you guys so very much for answering those questions, and you lady, I won't categorize you all. We want to open it up to your questions now. If you have questions, you can either speak those questions, or Veronica, you'll share questions from the queue as well. So let's take a question from the group that we're able to see here. Anyone in the group have a question they'd like to ask?
Yes, I would like to ask a question. Can you hear me?
Okay, I can.
Okay.
Um,
We have a permit for clearing a lot, and I'm trying to get a commercial policy of insurance and a bond. And the bonding company wants to know the name to be on the bond because the property's held in a land trust, not in my name alone, although I'm the beneficiary of the land trust.
okay, so am I understanding this, is this have relative to a building site plan?
Yes.
It is?
Oh yeah, I can't get them out to do the pre-con meeting because I need the bond and the commercial insurance to do that. And the bonding company says, what name do we put on the bond? Is it supposed to be the owner of the property, which would be the land trust? Or is it to be my name because I'm doing the work?
Gotcha.
Candace, would you mind if I give you a call right after the meeting? And
oh, that'd be great.
Okay, let me do that. Can you type your phone number or permit number in the chat box? Then we can free up this meeting for the site plan questions.
Oh, I thought this was site plan. Okay, all right.
We'll get you to your pre-con. Don't worry.
So I want to preface it again to say we don't want to get too in the weeds on specific issues because it's not really beneficial to the entire group, perhaps. If you have a general question in relationship to this new process or the submission of the building site plan, please feel free to ask those questions and table the other questions for one-on-ones with the DCD review team. And no, I'm not a technical person. I'm marketing and communications, so I might ask you a stupid question. Okay, any other questions from the group?
So Eugenie, I'd like to summarize. So what you're saying is that the septic design site plan, which was previously called the universal site plan, is no longer actually required for building.
Thank you, Teresa.
We can use it, which is what I do. I use it and then I draw the other items on it. But if we have a separate site plan for something else, then we can use that as well.
Yes, thank you for that summary, Teresa. David, can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, that's a fair summary of what we're saying. One thing that maybe we didn't speak to, I'm realizing as I looked at a couple of my notes here, is that Kitsap Public Health District actually is launching their own policy shift. I saw that it is going active on October 1st. So they've got a completely separate policy now, and we've worked with them to say, okay, this is kind of what we're going to do, and they've said this is what we're going to do. So if you connect with them on their website, they actually have some information. They've actually been promoting our marketing for our process as well. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If you have a septic design, you can utilize that and provide the required elements in our checklist on that septic site plan. But it's not necessary to utilize that one. And like I said before, we'd prefer it not to be the stamped approved one, because if we return it, for additional information that maybe got missed on the checklist, we don't want you to have to go back to the health district and get it restamped. Does that make sense? So they have, right, they're going to have different, less restrictive requirements than what we were trying to put together on the universal site plan. So they're really focusing just on their elements, and we're focusing on ours. And then you still have to submit your approved BSA from the health district to us, so we can look at those side by side and make sure, okay, maybe you've put an infiltration pit on here, and we know that has to be a certain distance from your septic drain field. And we're just making sure that the element that we're requiring, that I-pit, is not impacting the health district, so that you're not returning to the health district for something that really doesn't impact your septic design or well or whatever it might be. What we're having a lot of issues with is that we were returning that plan, And then people were taking it back to the health district, spending more money with their septic designer to have it altered, the plan altered, spending more money with the health district for that review, and then finding out, well, the health district didn't really care about this, and it's just a wasted effort. So that's what we're trying to get past right there, is we're trying to put together a plan where we're providing a more successful application. And we're working with the health district to make sure that we can accomplish that together.
Why, and this, Veronica and Bill and I have discussed this to no end. Why isn't it that the septic design site plans just don't need to meet the same requirements as the building plan? Because that's what we run into is, and you've got two different site plans.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be easier to work with health and say you need to, you know, maybe they don't need to even look for these things because they don't care about them, like critical areas. But
if
how
they
about
don't,
if we include them?
Yeah, but if they don't look for them, we're back to the same boat, Teresa. If they don't have the expertise to review for our issues, they're going to be left off, and we'll have to ask for them anyways.
Okay.
But that is a great question. But Dave, you might have more for that.
Yeah, and I've discussed that with the health district. So they have a completely different process as well. As we find, you know, a universal site plan on paper is a great idea. But if you review things the same way, if you have the same criteria of submittal, if you have the same requirements on both sides as to what needs to be on there, that could possibly work. But there's too many conflicts in our codes in order for us to accomplish that at this point in time. Maybe sometime in the future that might be a possibility. At this point in time, we feel like this is the best method. And once you see what the health district is putting out there, I think you'll agree that this is the best way forward for the time being. David,
let's take a question from Beverly. Where would we go to get help with drawing a site plan to scale? Would one of our panelists like to tackle that one?
I was waiting for somebody to jump on that one.
I was.
Who wants to, you got that, Veronica?
I can start with some basics, and Bill and Dave definitely fill in on me. It kind of depends on the property, but this is actually the kind of assistance that a permit technician might be able to provide. For example, we can help you research if your property was part of a plat, like a large lot or a short plat or a big plat. A lot of times we can find on our, we can show you, or we can help you pull the information for your property that will actually have dimensions of your property, and that's how you kind of start to draw. And then you go from there. I mean, it depends on whether you're doing it electronically or just with a good old-fashioned scale ruler. But yeah, it depends on the property, but usually county resources does have information on the basics, and then you'll need to know some information such as where do you want to put the house on there. A good scale drawing will have the outside property lines to scale, and then everything on the plan is to the same scale.
So does the brochure then, Veronica, address the idea of creating the building site plan and what it looks like and the scale information available?
Yes, the details are there, and the elements that need to go on it are there. And then it kind of depends on how much help the person actually needs with the act of drawing.
Gotcha. So here's a question from Misty. I have tried to reach out several times to clarify things that have been sent back, but have had trouble getting a hold of anyone. The live chat doesn't work for me, so can I have a better way than just general email to accomplish getting help?
So I'm actually, Eugenia, I'm not sure if you can tell, but I'm actually kind of tagging people in some answers. Mm-hmm. I did bring up to Misty using the general email, and that's always an option. If you use the general email, some people might think, oh no, I don't want to send it to a general email. That's going to go to nobody, but actually that gets tracked. There's a tracking mechanism for that, and it's supposed to go to the right person. Dave Kinley, I guess the question is, because Misty did follow up, and thank you for that. The question is not hearing back in a timely manner. And so do you want to address that?
I was looking for the specific question there, but timely manner from the general email, is that what the question
actually
is?
To individuals. It sounds like she got an information request, responded specific to the people, and it's taking a long time to hear back.
Got it. Okay. Well, that's fair if we're not responding in an appropriate time frame. So our metrics would require people to respond to inquiries like that within 48 hours. If you're not hearing back, you can let us know that you're not hearing back. That is one of the metrics that we've instituted is 48 hours through our Kitsap One call, and we call them CRMs. They're are basically a response to the question should be within 48 hours. So if you're not hearing back, like I said, it's something we'd like to hear about.
Mm-hmm. Can I answer one more thing about the instructions on drawing a site plan? The level of detail, if you do have a small project, which Beverly, you might have a smaller project, there might even be a shortcut way that we can help you come up with a site plan. It might not work for something like a new house where you have to draw every element, but if you were doing like a garage or an addition, there is parcel search mapping available that might need to provide assistance. And if you'd like to put your contact information or your permit number, I can definitely have someone follow up with you about that.
Great. Okay, any other questions from the group?
This is Bill Palmer. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, Bill.
The issues that I face a lot, because I do all my own site plans, even though I may not have drawn the plans. I've got quite a few building permit applications where I do the site plan as well as all the other stuff. But a couple of things that you're asking for that I think are just ridiculous and don't really help anybody in the long run, and that is to have to count trees that have 4-inch diameter or greater on your site plan, particularly if you're in a rural area. Even providing a massing of how much cover area, it's just a guess. Because nobody is going to spend the money to go out and survey all that. It's way too expensive, and I don't even think you need it in the first place. And then I've got a whole bunch of issues with regard to soil amendments too, but I'll just start with that.
Bill,
I can
would you like
help
to answer the question?
Yeah, I can help answer that. Hi, Bill. Bill here.
Hi, Bill.
So yeah, you're referring to the site assessment and planning packet.
I am.
And I would have to agree with you. The site assessment and planning packet is a requirement from State Department of Ecology that we adopted. I've asked the question just as you have. Why is it even necessary? We do our reviews. We know by imagery that the amount of, say, timber or vegetation that's on a particular parcel. I really don't have a great answer for you other than it was driven by Washington State Department of Ecology. It's a requirement for municipalities and counties to follow that particular code or requirement. I don't have a good answer for you. I don't know if there's a way to get rid of that. It's something that I actually had just talked to a colleague of mine about. A lot of the questions are very redundant. And I know it just adds, to me, it just adds more mess in the whole stormwater permit application. So that's something that I'd like to follow up with you, Bill, and everyone else. That is something that I have asked about to Jennifer Lawrence, who helps with code writing for stormwater. So I'd like to see where I can take that and to try to help you folks out there, because I do feel the same way as you do, Bill.
Eugenie, I wanted to answer, there's two questions in the chat that are very similar. I want to answer that really quick. And then it looks like Aaron has his hand up. But I know these questions were put in earlier. And Dave Kinley, this one's for you. But the gist of the question is, how come DCD language isn't common English? If the code language is confusing, why can't we just change it? I mean, an example might be, we've got Bill here from Stormwater. An example might be, the code talks about a dispersion trench. Does everybody know what a dispersion trench is? Probably not. It's in the code, and so I think as a department we have an obligation to describe what that is. But Kinley, could you please speak to why people perceive code language specifically, as a code expert, as confusing or not understandable?
Yeah, I mean, there's a different vernacular when it comes to code language, for sure. So the benefit is our code does have a section where we define the majority of those terms that may not be layman terms. So I can speak to building code specifically. We have a whole chapter in the building code, chapter 2, defines terms, right? So that brings some clarity to it, right? A lot of it is just, different industries have different languages that they speak, right? And it's really difficult to boil things down into terms that are more layman terms. So that's our job, to help define and help to explain that terminology. In some ways, the document would go from a page to 20 pages if we tried to define every last term in that process. But know that we're here to help you through that process.
So I'm going to follow up on that question, David, sharing one also in the chat. As a septic design company, what elements will be required on the record of construction in light of changes that have been occurred of this new policy? We're aware after we've submitted to BSA, they've already submitted. I imagine that this will be addressed by Kimberly Jones. I think it's great that both DCD and Kitsap Public Health District are working to streamline.
Yeah, exactly. Kimberly and I have spoken frequently regarding the changes. We were, some of the impetus of the changes is conversations that Kimberly and I had regarding difficulties. She would call me and say, okay, so got this returned to us because parking wasn't shown on the site plan. And we wanted to see that, DCD wanted to see that. Health does not. So there she is reviewing a site plan or a BSA again for an additional parking stall, and she's like, I don't need to look at this, right? So those are some of the things that Kimberly and I were talking about in this process. And so that's why we wanted to make this change, and ultimately we moved quickly to make this change so that we could stop some of that from happening. Even before our policy went into effect, we were working with our reviewers to not return it to the septic design for some of those items. So just to stop that backflow to the health district. To answer your question specifically regarding the septic design, I would say work with Kitsap Public Health to come up with the design criteria that they are requiring. I think if you talk to them, I've read through their policy, they're looking for location of the septic system, the tanks, all that stuff, and then these buffer lines to be drawn around them, and for the well as well. I think that's as simple as you can get. I think they want a general idea where the house is going to go so that they know that that's not being impacted. And then all the other design criteria that we would have, like infiltration pits, dispersion trenches, driveways, parking areas, propane tanks, whatever other things that need to be outside of those buffers for the septic design, we're looking at those and making sure they're not impacting the septic design. So should be relatively simple. For a septic designer, if you're just hired to do the septic design, then it should be really simple to work with the health district to get that taken care of. And then if you are being hired by your client to also draw the site plan for DCD, that's where you go through our checklist. Hopefully that clarifies things.
Thank you, David. We have another question for one of our panelists. Feel free to jump in. We used the link to the county's wetland maps. We were not near any wetlands, yet we're required to pay for a wetlands professional to go on site and review it. The findings were no wetlands. Why are the county's maps not sufficient for this information?
I don't know if I can answer that in full, but I can tell most of the folks out there that the largest buffer for a wetland is 250 feet. And oftentimes someone might have a 5-acre parcel, but there might be an offsite wetland. So if there's any hydric soils or mapped wetlands kind of within that range, oftentimes our environmental reviewers will ask for some kind of a wetland certification. I'm not going to get too deep into it because I'm not an environmental reviewer, but I know that's oftentimes someone will go on to parcel search. They'll look at the critical areas overlay. They'll go, oh, there's no mapped wetlands on my property. There may be one, 200 or 300 feet away. So a lot of times, the environmental people are asking for that. And not to make excuses, but a lot of times, and I'll give you an example. My daughter's looking, or actually has now purchased the property. She asked that I go on to Parcel Map and look to see if there was any critical areas. Her parcel had slopes that were greater than 250 feet away. But when I went to the winter imagery on Parcel Map, I noticed there was a wetland. There was no mapping anywhere of a wetland or hydric soils. But because I did some due diligence and I went to the winter imagery, and I don't know if a lot of folks are aware of that, the 2012 imagery on Parcel Map is a winter imagery, which oftentimes shows, the ground lay and the ground cover a lot better than, say, a spring or summer imagery. But that was an example. There was a wetland on her property. It was a category 4. It has like 110 foot buffer plus a 15-foot building setback, and she's on 5 acres with no way of knowing. Luckily, she had me as a a person to go to. But it's a great question. I know our parcel mapping is kind of a work in progress. There's oftentimes a lot of unmapped streams. Our environmental people usually pick that up by looking at the contours of the parcel mapping. Oftentimes it'll show drainage features. So even with streams, there's a lot of streams that are unmapped, but when we find those, we try to tag those parcels so that in the future, if there's other vacant lands around there, we're able to kind of get a hit on that. And if someone comes in for advice or, just doing their due diligence on feasibility, there's times where we pull the parcel up and we find a tag note and it's like, oh, there was a wetland on the neighboring property. So yeah, it's not always 100%, but there is, like I said, sometimes it's offsite wetlands that might have a big buffer that could encroach onto your property.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions from the group? Any more questions?
Yeah, I would like to ask one.
Okay.
I'm hoping that you might be able to help me find or point me to the right folks who can help me find information on requirements for stormwater drainage on High Bank. I'm in a bluff, sensitive area, I think is what you guys call it, up here in Hansville. And all of us have the drains that go, the drains start up on the lots, the long, narrow lots, carry down the water up over the bank, the tubes that come down. except for I have a neighbor who, some reason, has been allowed to build a monstrosity, a huge house. And I'm sinking. I'm lower than him, and there's clear sinkage on my bank, and I'm not getting responses. I've tried other agencies. I'm not getting answers to why he's allowed to damage my property like this when I've had to pay, go through permit process just to cut 2 little trees. And he's allowed to build this thing and no drainage. So I really am trying to find what's applicable there, and how come he doesn't have to have the right drainage for that site. Where do I find those site requirements?
I can answer that. So I look at a lot of properties up there in the Hansville area. Anytime projects are working by critical slopes, if you're within 200 feet of a high hazard slope, which would be a bluff, those permits are always engineered. They're engineered and they require a geotech. So the engineered review is driven and it works hand in hand with the geotechnical engineer. They make recommendations, then the civil engineer acknowledges their recommendations and then does the design work for that project. It's very rare to have a waterfront property that has a bluff that doesn't do a direct discharge to Puget Sound. I don't know if I've ever recalled seeing one in my review that they were able to do something else, like maybe sheet flow through a dispersion trench or infiltration, because what happens is in those critical areas and those bluffs, oftentimes we don't want groundwater saturation, especially on a critical area like that. So that's why everything is collected and conveyed away. I'd be interesting to know the address of that parcel and to do a little investigation. I don't know, is this project, is it underway? Has it been completed? It's
not totally completed, but it's definitely well underway. And I tried working with whatever the inspector and that side of the house. I'm not quite sure how you guys all work together. And I'm just getting 0 responses. Came out once, and I'm just frustrated. Like, there's clear damage and it can't go on another wet season. And even if it was approved by a civil engineer, they were wrong, or a geotech engineer. Like, clearly they were not accurate. There's clear water not being properly drained away, and it's saturating and causing damage, causing sinking. So I'm trying to figure out what I can do here. So I would love some help.
Janelle, have you reached out to anyone with DCD, or were you having troubles getting a hold of, say, me or a stormwater reviewer?
I didn't really know the options. I think I had just tried whatever was or got through to like the inspection side of the house. Or I don't know what side, how this all fits together. I've never built a property. I'm not as familiar with all this, to be honest. But no, I have not tried DCD. So when I saw this invite and I saw stormwater, I thought, oh, this could fit in here. And it sounds like it could be in your area of interest. And I would love to. Yeah.
Sure. And that's my passion, is helping people. And
great.
If you have a problem, certainly you can email me. I can look into it. That's the best I can do. Now, we rely heavy on geotechnical expertise. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a geotechnical engineer. But I know I rely heavy on their expertise. That's what they're qualified to do and to make those decisions. I do the review if I see something that's wrong, or if I have a concern. I try to address that through information requests, but I'd be certainly open to you emailing me and giving me more information so I can look into it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How do I email through that site? Is that right? Or how do I know how to email him?
Can you type into the chat, Janelle?
Yeah.
You can send a message directly to Bill Just
Gotcha.
click it. Yeah, just
Yeah, I'll
click
do
on
that.
select him and then send a message to him. We're going to take a question from Sheila asking, where can we get printed copies of the checklist requirements? Veronica, can you speak to that?
Yeah, actually, I told Sheila I would ask you about that. But I mean, our office is closed to the public at this time. I guess you could put in a request if you want one sent to you. We can make arrangements for that. For now, it is intended to be a PDF. What do you think, Eugenie?
Yeah, it actually is.
Okay.
But I was going to let you answer.
So it's not available where all the other documents are?
Yeah, the question was about a printed copy.
It was about trying to get a printed copy. If you need a printed copy, you would need to request one. And if you type in your email address in the chat, we can follow up with you to provide one to you. If you have the ability to access a computer, you can download a digital copy. The checklist as a standalone is available. And the brochure is being tweaked right now with adding some hot links into it. It will also be available on the website too, that you will be able to download it or to look at it as well. Okay.
There was one other clarification I wanted to make, Eugenie.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about, make sure we're not miscommunicating. The septic area does still need to be identified on the site plan. We do want that shown as an element. We just don't, it doesn't need to be the septic design by the licensed designer that has to put it on there, or their drawing doesn't need to be the site plan. So I hope that makes sense. As a whole, a DCD site plan should still identify the septic area location.
Thank you. Someone's asking, can we put a link in the chat right now for the checklist? And we can't, because it's embedded inside the Cognito form for you to download it. So we don't have easy access to it. It would take a couple minutes to find it, and I don't want to hold everybody up while we search for that. But please do email us and request it if you'd like a printed copy or to get more information. We'll follow up with information about following up on questions on this, so you can find that information on our website later, as far as the brochure, the checklist, etc. So one thing that I want to follow up, Veronica, as a question to you, access to DCD personnel. Can you speak a little bit about the options and what those options entail when people are coming to DCD for help with whatever their permit application happens to be about?
Yeah, I can. Did I already cover that?
Well, you talked about a little bit about it, but I'm wondering if we should speak to each of the criteria for access in terms of the pre-application, staff consults, and the hourly opportunities, as well as the live chat and the email and phone calls.
Okay. Well, I definitely will. Well, I'll start with the staff consultation, because I think Terry had also noted that there's a struggle here. How can she get more upfront information about critical area requirements? The staff consultation is, if you're not familiar with it, it's a 30-minute meeting. It's one of our more informal ones, meaning there's no research done ahead of time. Sometimes the staff will take a look at the property, but they're just kind of coming in cold and giving their best direction. What they're trying to identify is major showstoppers, real big ticket items that an applicant should know about should they proceed with feasibility or actually putting down money to do a project. Maybe they should know that it requires a land use action or permit, for example. Is the staff always going to be able to do an in-depth critical area analysis during that meeting? Likely not. Typically, they're going to be using the mapping, which we already discussed. Obviously, it's not 100%. I think I was in a meeting yesterday, and it's not close to 100%. So they'll do their best to give direction. There's also other meetings, like an hourly rate meeting. That's where you might know you have a specific issue. Maybe it's building, maybe it's fire, maybe it's stormwater, and you want more targeted, in-depth assistance. You want to send someone some materials, you want them to review them. and then talk about the project at a designated time. That's an option. There's a pre-application meeting, which is definitely a more formal, larger type format than the staff consultation. The pre-application will have review of your property ahead of time, and then the staff will meet with you. It's like an hour long, and they'll provide a detailed code summary of what is needed for an application after the meeting. So it's way more in depth than a staff consultation. And Terry, I don't know if that answers your questions, but in general, we have more to do to try to give people the information they need to successfully apply for permits. It's not a closed subject. We look forward to your feedback on how we can help. If you want to give us those specific examples, the supervisors, the management team, the executives like Dave Kinley, we want to make it better. So if we've fallen down on a project, we have to review that.
Thank you, Veronica. So I see in the queue that Sheila says she has a couple of questions that she'd like to ask.
Hi, thanks. I had to unmute there.
Sure.
So I keep hearing some general questions from people, and I have an unusual background. Years in DCD, I was a director at one point. Recently retired. It's great. I highly recommend it. I'm having to develop a private property for a house next door. And I know it's COVID. I know you're supposed to do the help desk ticket. You call the helpline. I've really gotten lots of crickets. I've had one, and I talked to Veronica privately about this. I've had one take 10 days to get a response from planning. I did another one with Steve Heacock 8 weeks before I got a reply. So it's really frustrating, and I'm from that side, so I know most of the tricks to how to get around. So when I hear some of the questions, even though you want to talk to them privately, I think it might hit quite a few people here that are trying to get some of those steps figured out. My parcel happens to have a type stream. We had that delineated. I've got a wetlands that's being delineated. I've got stormwater. They're waiting for the final report on that. I've got my structural and building plans, and yet I can't get a simple list for my checklist so I can get all my ducks in a row in order to submit. I'm seeing where you have to go on electronic submittals, but I want to see everything. So once I enter, I'm going to be pretty clear and clean to folks. So I have 3 questions, unless you haven't said.
Sheila, I don't know if everybody else is hearing that, but there's kind of like a delay. We're losing part of what you say. I heard you say you have 3 questions. Let's just say we'll start with taking the first one. How about that?
What's the approximate turnaround time for plant interview and for building to do theirs?
What's the approximate turnaround time for planning review and the last part again, please?
Building
review.
Building, okay.
Assuming everything, all the ducks are lined up. You get everything, it's all stamped.
Okay. So I know this question has come up before. It came up during the focus groups. Folks were asking, why can't we put like a Domino's pizza tracker on your permit application to kind of show you it's gone from being in the oven to being in the car and driven to your house. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I can speak to about the process is that we wrote a section in the brochure that's defined what does under review mean. And in that section, we spoke to the fact that once you submit everything that you need, you will get a response back from the permit services team acknowledging that they have received all of your information, that you are ready now to go under review. And your application moves from the intake process to being in the under review process. And then people will not hear anything more from permit services or from the review team until their application has been thoroughly reviewed and there's feedback provided to them. So a lot of times people feel like they've fallen into a deep black hole and they wonder what's happened. But the fact is is that your application is in line with all the other permit applications that were submitted before you and after you. And as soon as you're in queue, the review team will pull your application, do the review process, and provide you that detailed feedback that you're ready to go or that additional information is needed. So Veronica, is there something more that you can speak to in regards to that?
Not really, although, yeah, the question was actually a question recently was also, how come I don't just hear from every reviewer as they finish? I can go get started on any corrections or ask any questions. And we actually used to do it that way. If any of you have been around, I've been around quite a while, but we actually used to piecemeal feedback back. A plans examiner might go, hey, you need to go get engineering on this. And a stormwater reviewer might say, hey, so-and-so, go track down this site development storm drainage system. And that was very problematic. The problem is applicants were kind of chasing their tails. Well, they actually might be going to go fix something on their plans when they might have had a bigger issue with zoning that would require them to move the house over or do a different storm drainage design or move it away from a critical area or get another report. So in 2012, we went to a consolidated review, which ensures that when your first review is done, it's done by everybody. We vetted requirements against each other. Bill, you can attest, sometimes stormwater and environmental, they're distinct areas of the code, but they go hand in hand. We don't want to release stormwater comments until environmental's done and they've vetted those corrections against each other to make sure they're consistent. So that also tends to be a question is, well, I know so-and-so's done, and I think they might need something from me. So I'm going to go hunt that down and get working on it. But we prescribe to a consolidated review process.
Mm-hmm. So can you just give me an approximate, you said 6 for one, 8 weeks for another, environmental reviews the longest, turn them in. I'm just looking for a really general, this is how long it takes.
That is a frequent question because our clients, of course, it's the first question they ask. And I actually put in the comments, have you guys considered creating a dashboard similar to Pierce County where you can go to the dashboard and they've got dates. So like right now, they're processing stuff that was submitted on September 9th. So I can at least look at that and say, well, they're already processing stuff, reviewing stuff that was submitted on September 9th. So therefore, we're looking at about a 2-week period before they start actually looking at your documents. But yep. I frequently run into this as well as an intake process where you submit and then you wait. I had one recently that took 4 weeks before it was processed for intake. There was nothing wrong. Everything was there. It took 4 weeks. And so there's never, I hate, and I have my contacts I can reach out to, but I hate constantly bugging them. Where are we right now? And although I agree with the information release, and it has all the consolidated comments, but when something like, okay, you submitted this document, it's 3 pages, but the signature page was missing, can you call me or email me? Because that was the only comment and it took 4 weeks. Once I submitted it, and all it was, oh, I didn't realize the signature page was missing because I got it from the consultant and then just uploaded it. Well, had I known that, I could have immediately uploaded it.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you. We appreciate that question. We're going to let that be our last question. And David, I'll let you respond to that before we wrap up because we want to respect people's time and we're a little after our hour right now.
Yeah, I can address that. And Teresa, appreciate the input on that. There are some extenuating circumstances for some recent stuff, and that it's by no means intended to be an excuse. But I mean, we have a high permit volume right now. We're all working remotely due to COVID. A lot of stuff was stopped for a long time, and now we have a big influx of permits. I will point out that if you go to our website, the DCD website, Down at the bottom on the right, there's a link called Permit Statistics. So if you click on that, it does take you to a bit of a dashboard. Now, this doesn't give you real-time information necessarily, but like on that, residential permits, it says first review timeframe 30 days, resubmittal 15, revisions 30. Those are our standard review goals. It said on there, it says 143 permits in review right now. And then oldest permit waiting for review, first review completion is 722. So if it was submitted on July 22nd, we're working on that one. That kind of gives you an idea of our volume right now. There's next to that is land use and engineering, and that gives you an indicator of first review, 90 days. Type 2 permits would be 60 days. Type 3 permits, 90 days. And then total permits in review, 124. So we have a bit of a dashboard. It's probably not the level of detail that like Pierce County, per se, gives. But we do have that information up there right now. It gives you a bit of a snapshot.
I didn't know that was there. So that's actually very informative, because now I know I can go look at that.
Yeah, bottom right on a link on our main page for DCD. Along with that, there's other data that you can pull. It's interesting to me. It tells us, number of submitted permits, evaluations, and also the approved, not approved permits. So really good data analytics there, if that's interesting to you.
Thank you, David. So David, I'm going to pitch this last one to you. We've gone through the process improvement. It's been implemented. We're sharing the information with the public. The process is launched. Brochures and checklists are out there. What's next? Where do we go from here?
Sure. Yeah. No, well, we've discussed a lot of it already. Our partnership with Kitsap Public Health District on this has really been appreciated. As you can see, it's been a result of a lot of collaboration back and forth. We've taken the community input for this as well. Times like this, what we're doing right now is highly valuable for us to get feedback. So we really appreciate the input that's being given to us. It doesn't have to be positive. We'll take it anyway. We want to know the things that are not working, and we're actively working towards moving those forward. There's been some things that have been brought up in this time that don't necessarily have to do with building site plan, but they are things we've heard, both through the community outreach that Eugenie's been working on, and also conversations, emails, other communication that we receive from people. And so just know we are continuing to work on process improvements. That's important to us. It really is. But we want to hear what you have to say. We want to make things easier for the applicant. We don't need more layers of complexity. We really want to simplify matters. And so that's a big push for us, to be listening to the community and responding to it appropriately. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, David. One of the things that we have done as part of this outreach is to design a small card, a counter card that can be given if you are a septic designer or you're a public-facing organization and you want to give your client information about this building site plan submittal process. We have a card that we like to provide for you to be able to give to your clients and share with them. If you're interested in receiving a supply of those, please type that information in the chat before you sign off, saying I'd like to get some and how many you think you'd like to have. Also reminding you that the brochure, please expect it to be online come Monday morning, that you can access it as a digital document and you can share a link with your clients, or you can have them come online and check it out for themselves and download it if they'd like to too. Again, thanking Veronica Basson from Permit Services, David Kinley, our Assistant Director and Chief Building Official, and Bill Bumbelow from our DCD review team. Thank you all for being here today, and most importantly, thank every one of you for tuning in and sharing this conversation with us. This is Eugenie Jones signing off.
Thanks, Eugenie.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Eugenie.
All right.
Welcome.
I think we need one every Friday.
I'd be helpful.
My calendar.